Welcome to Security and GRC Decoded, the podcast where security, governance, risk, and compliance professionals, CISOs, executive leaders, and practitioners can stay ahead of industry trends and challenges. I'm your host, Raj Krishnamurthy, founder of Compliance Co. Join us twice a month to bring you expert insights, actionable strategies, and real-world stories to elevate your security, governance, risk, and compliance programs. Each week, we decode the complexities of GRC to help you make smarter decisions and drive innovation in your organization. Let's dive into today's conversation. Welcome. Hey. Welcome to Security and GRC Decoded. I'm your favorite host, Raj Krishnamurthy. And today we have the awesome Mukund Sarma with us. Mukund has 10 plus years in security engineering. He's the deputy CISO and head of product security at Chime. And Mukund has been a practitioner, a software engineer, and architect at companies like Credit Karma before. Mukund, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Raj.
Mukund, what made you become a security engineer?
I don't think it was like a very conscious choice. I think it just happened so. I was working on a bunch of crypto when crypto didn't mean currency for the government, and working on a lot of key sharing mechanisms as a software developer, and then eventually moved into the space of security because I was like, I want to do a lot more than just pure cryptographic engineering. I want to be able to I just realized that the scope of what I was doing didn't really, I wasn't happy with it. I wanted to do a lot more. So then I started just working on traditional AppSec and did a bunch of consulting for a bit, but then realized I couldn't really get into problems too deep. I wanted to stay on a problem a little longer than what the consulting gig let me. So I kind of moved into a traditional product security role after that.
Got it. And I wanted to, I think I wanted to talk to you about particularly practical controls, right, or policy controls. I think we briefly covered it last time we spoke. But before we do that, I want to get your perspectives as a security engineer and as the deputy CISO, right? What is your view of governance, risk, and compliance?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think the answer varies very dependent on which company also you're looking at and what you're working on towards it, I would say. But I think for me, it's like a counterpart to what the traditional ProdSec function or the AppSec function is also trying to do. I think it's a way for you to actually validate whether what you're saying and what you're doing is actually what is a reality. It's kind of like a mirror is kind of the way I look at it. Are you able to if you're going to an audit and telling that, hey, we have XYZ and we're doing the something for making sure we don't have secrets in code or we don't have bad configs or whatever, is that the reality, or are you what's going on there? So and also making sure that you are in compliance with at the minimum of what your business needs, but along with everything. I think the way I look at it, if you have a strong security program with a strong maturity, the compliance just follows along. But there are things that you might not just assume that is not necessarily, but from a compliance perspective is needed. So it's just like a good validation step and someone to keep you grounded and honest is kind of the way I look at it.
Got it. So if engineering and security had a linter, it would be called GRC.
Yeah, that's a well said. Yeah.
Okay. I think the reality is that I think there are people continue to operate in silos, right? The GRC team, which typically is the second line of defense, operates in silo from the security team. And the security team, not in all cases, in many cases, operate in silo with the engineering team, right? What do you see as the fundamental issue on why not in all places, in some places we continue to operate at silos, and how do we sort of bring them all together? Anything out of your experience or any ideas that come to mind?
Yeah, I think you're getting down to very fundamental aspects as to how do we collaborate well as a function, and if both the security and the GRC function is part of the security teams, then in general, is it better for the business? Is it much more easier for you to do it this way? There are so many places where actually it is not needed for you to collaborate. It's actually required that you potentially even like report to different functions, just because there is a governance and risk function that is like validating what the security team is doing. It's closer to like the internal audit fight, but it really boils down to how you want to structure and what makes sense for the business is kind of the way I look at it. I'm not sure if I answered the question, but yeah, that's the way I approach it, at least.
But what do you think is outside of security, right? What do you think is the view of security and GRC from other business teams, the leadership, the management teams, engineering? What do you think their view is?
I think most places, people are still recovering from security being the naysayer and being able to like go and also be the bad guy, for the lack of a better term here. And I think a lot of it comes with the job. And I think it's important for us to be that person to say, sometimes this is not the right thing to do, and people should hear that. But also, like, I think a lot of teams have adapted into the world of like being more collaborative and aligned with what the rest of the business function is and trying to meet where they are. Actually, a lot of the effectiveness of and culture of the security program is also like how effective and how well are you able to like meet where the business is, and are you being pragmatic? Are you able to like work with the folks to like convey the risk, convey what's going on, but also like meet where they are and say, okay, you know what, I think here the business risk is way more than the security risk. So as long as you folks are aware of this and you are willing to make that call, it's on you to like this thing. But yeah, I think moving away from like the gating function to like the advising function is the way I look at it.
Got it. So you
yeah.
see security not just as I think not just as the gatekeepers, but also as potential advisors
For sure.
to the business.
Yeah, I think being the gatekeepers is kind of also this might be a controversial opinion, but I don't think we got to be the gatekeepers. I think if you can learn a lot from a lot of the legal teams out there, for instance, is like they don't really decide whether or not a product must go or not. I think they are just giving their guidance on here are the potential risks. Here's what could go wrong. Here are some things that you could do to mitigate them or contain them. But it's up to the product manager or the product person or the business people there to make a decision on whether that risk is okay for them and they still want to go with it or not. Versus I think the minute a security function like gets too deeply involved and like is like emotionally attached to it, it becomes their problem. And then once it becomes your problem, it's much more harder to govern in a way which is like being pragmatic in that sense. So there's actually advantages in you just not like simple things like we say things like we do a security review. We don't say we do a security approval because we don't approve it. It's your decision to approve it, right? We are giving you the risks. We're telling you what could go wrong. Sometimes there may be nothing, but we're just working with you to tell you that, and then it's your decision to say whether you approve it or not. You don't approve it. We only review it for you. So.
Got it. And how early do you think the security teams need to get involved in these reviews? And I think that's a very good point you're making. Words do matter, but how early do you think the security teams need to get involved?
The earlier the better is always true. I think it's like the do you have the bandwidth? Do you have the capacity? Are you able to keep up with the workload of what the business expects? And also, how are you approaching it matters, I would say. So if you are approaching it in a point of like going and saying absolutely no or things in that sense, then people are going to be like less receptive to come and work with you. Also, in my experience, I think it's just more of collaborating with you, understanding what the risk could go and understanding what it is like. I think everyone has this dream of like security is involved in every stage of the life cycle, and the earlier the better and all that stuff. The reality is there will be a lot of people that are going and experimenting way before they talk to security, and that's just the human nature of things. It's just like when you're learning something, you're not going to learn, okay, what's a security best practice from the first day. You're just trying to figure out how to learn something, do it, use it well, and then come back. And once you've gotten a grip of how to use it, then you look at, okay, how do you do this the right way? So there's definitely while the while the most ideal situation is that you're always involved right from the ideation and things in that sense, the reality is I think most people tend to have a version of it in their mind already before they reach out to security. But again, that's where you like have built that collaborative environment to say, you can come brainstorm with us, give us your ideas, and we'll tell you what can go wrong, kind of a thing. So
Got it. And is this there is always this friction and tension between these two different teams, right? Engineering and security. What is your take on that? Why do you? I mean, is this real? Do you see that there is an tension between engineering and security?
doesn't have to be is what I've realized.
It
I
doesn't
don't
have
think
to be.
it doesn't have to be.
So
it-
what makes it to be and what makes it not to be?
Yeah, I think what I've seen is a lot of security teams trying to push the security tools and functions onto the business, onto the engineering teams, and make it their problem. And like to say that we have this thing and we are not willing to understand the business context of it, and we are just going to say this is a high criticality or high severity ticket, and you got to fix it in 14 days. Whereas in reality, I don't think I've really met any engineers that outright come and say they don't want to fix it. I think they are, if you explain it well, they understand what is going on. I think they're more receptive to doing it. It's just like, do they have the right tools? Do they have the right advice? Do they have the right way of knowing it? And is that even a right assessment? That gets down to boiling into it, because more often than not, you start looking at it, it might seem, your tool might say it's a high or critical, but you actually go look at how it's being used, where it's being happening, and then you realize like, it's actually closer to a medium or a low. It's not really that likelihood. There's no real likelihood of that being actually exploited. Regardless, I think people should go fix it, because you never know if that's going to change. It's kind of a point in time review, but at the same time, working with them to like making sure that there are enough tools that the engineers have. There's guidance on how to ask for an exception. There are like all these opportunities, like to say that, you know what, we will get to it. We just need a few more weeks or a few more days to get to it, and trying to see if that makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, you got to like push back. That is also part of that's kind of what the security's job is, just like advise and strongly advise when it is against what your reality of the situation is.
Got it.
So yeah, I think a lot of times, even like making engineers come and log into a security tool and make sure that it is resolved in your tool, because you don't want to like meet where the engineers are. I think that's like right from there to like having low confidence in the findings, not understanding or having an ability of what are the engineers even talking about or doing. All those kind of things tend to build that friction, and they lose trust in your team. Basically, that's kind of the crux of it.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing you basically say is that if you collaborate, and if the intent is right and the spirit is right, that I'm here to collaborate with you, I'm here to sort of coach you, guide you, help you, more than not taking a high pedestal, then there is all obviously an opportunity for us to be able to work together.
Yeah.
So more of a carrot than a stick, right? In making this work.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think it is also important to have that stern hand and say, you know what, I don't think that is right. This is a reason why you can have telemetry from various sources, right? You can even have, like, for example, if your runtime sensors are telling you, it's actually being used and this is how it is, and you have a good telemetry of that, then you can just point at or say that I don't think what you're saying is true. Like, this is where we are seeing, like, why would we see this if it weren't really running at runtime or whatever, and having that conversation, because you also don't want to become that a team that will just agree with everything. Like, it's just like you just have to like maintain that good balance is kind of the way I look at it.
Got it. Now, you've been a security engineer. You are a security engineer even today, and the question is that I think this idea of shift left in security has almost taken a strong hold in the last few years. What is your take on that?
It's incredibly hard to get it right. It's very effective. It works well, but it's also not a very simple thing to get right from day one. It takes a lot of building additional paved paths along with shift left tooling. I think that is, you can't do one and not the other. I think it also depends on is that the right choice for the business, right? And that is kind of a conversation you need to have with your own teams to make sure that is what is needed. I think whatever the shift left strategy and how much ever we want to do that, we also want to know the what's actually happening at the runtime. Like as someone who's responsible for the security program and have to know what's going on there, I want to catch these findings well in advance. I want to be able to fix it. I want to be able to prevent it. But also I need the reality of knowing what's actually happening today in the ecosystem. And so I think it's a good mixture and combination of many, but I think a lot of companies have gotten this right, but it takes a long, long time. It's kind of the crux of the problem. It's just like it involves a lot of tooling. It involves culture changes. It involves people wanting to like work with you to make sure that it is the right thing for them. They should also realize why it is important for their teams, not just for your team. So it's a hard problem, but I think there is value in it.
Got it. So what I'm hearing you say is that I think the idea of looking at shift left is, one, make sure that you have buy-in. Two, make sure there is a very clear paved path. Three, make sure there is a very clear exception handling, because not everybody is going to fit
100%.
into that mold. And four, do this together, right? And where you are able to participate as early as possible.
Yeah.
I think those are great points, Mukund. Like, I think one of the flip sides of this idea of shift left, right? I think the flip sides of is that you're going to produce more signals. And I think it's a debatable topic whether it is signal or noise. To some, it may appear signals, to some, it may appear noise, and also from a time dimension perspective. What has your experience been as you try to shift left, right? And there are more signals that the developers have to consume. How do you manage that? How do they manage that?
I think this is going back to that paid path part is like if that existed and we worked on building that together, all those signal or noise, whatever that part is there, is like handled, because it's much easier for the developer to just go through that paid path and be done with it. That way they don't have to deal with all of these different alerts, right? At Chime, we tried this thing with this we have different classes of issues we have tried it this way, like simple, like we are a microservices ecosystem. So we have like hundreds of microservices, and the default, like, okay, how do you authenticate and authorize all of these various APIs calling each other in the ecosystem, right? We realized that if we, earlier when we were working on this, we just realized there were like so many different frameworks being used by different teams, because all of them wanted to go fast and we didn't have a good centralized framework or thing from the security team. So even for us, auditing became really hard. That's making sure that, is this actually protected endpoint, or is this actually a protected method, or whatever it is. And then what we did is we built out that paid path to say that, all you have to do is define this one JSON blob in your code repo, and we'll take care of the authentication and authorization for you. That gives us like very simple ways of easily auditing what's happening. And at the same time, it's also very easy for the developers. They don't have to like build a complex auth system behind it. There are SDKs, and it supports every language, and they don't have to like redo anything. All they have to do is like spend 5 minutes to just get that set up and maintain it. That's all. So that is like an example of a paid path which we worked on. And actually, it's actually much more easier for someone to use that than go build their own auth and say that they're just like, we'll just use whatever security has built, because it's like they don't have to worry about that from our
absolutely.
So,
I mean, and you're totally right. If I'm an engineer developing a business function, why would I want to know all the possible auth to workflows or OpenID workflows? I mean, it's not that I shouldn't know, but that's my core job is something else, right? So
exactly. And and like even just like simplifying that whole thing to like make it easy for even the developers. For example, instead of going the traditional OAuth scopes kind of approach, we took the methods to say like, you tell us who your callers are, and you don't have to worry about scopes, and we will figure out. Because if you talk to a developer, all they know is like, okay, this service is calling me. They don't really know what the scope name is, how is that related to the permission and all that stuff. So the whole platform handles all of that for them. They don't have to worry about any of that stuff. All they have to define is
makes sense.
Who it is.
And I think this is where you're saying that it is awfully difficult to do, because in some ways you'll have to understand the forest first about what are the possible opportunities for each of those application teams trying to do, let's say, authorization or authentication, and then figure out what is the most common denominator that you're going to build in terms of the platform for a paid path, right? Is that 100%. Why you said it is it is very complex?
Yeah. And also like undoing everything that everyone has already done.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So you have to like migrate them over and remove all the older ways of doing it, because Ultimately now, it gives us that visibility and a way to audit it very easily, but it's also not like a 2-month project. It's closer to in the years kind of realm because of the scale of what it is.
But when you approach this typically, Mukund, do you differentiate between greenfield and brownfield? What I mean by that is, do you draw a line in the sand and say any application henceforth takes this approach, shall take this approach, and then you take a very different approach to the applications that you've already built? I would say the legacy applications. Is that how you think about this?
So yes and no, I would say, because there is it's kind of in many ways arrogant if I say I understand all of it and go and get it right. And I also don't understand the complexities of what different and sensitivities to like latency and other aspects that different teams will have. I think we have built for the general use case, not the specialized use cases. And there will always be exceptions, right? There will always be situations where someone needs to go do something. Their intent is pure. Their intent is like they need to be able to do that. At the same time, they just can't afford the platform that we have built because it adds a lot of latency, for example. For the record, I don't think it's high latency, but even let's say that was an argument over here. At that point, like we just have to like say, okay, as long as it meets our minimum requirements, which is to say that you're authenticating all the calls and you're authorizing the different endpoints, and we have a way to audit what you're doing, you can do whatever you want. If you want to go build your own authentz that makes all those requirements because it works for your situation, go do it. As long as we can still have a way to audit it. That's our requirement.
Beautiful.
And that is kind of why we built it this way. But if you have your own reasons, and you could very well have your own reasons, then go do it. But as long as we have those met, we are fine with it. So
I love what you're saying, because I think it goes to the crux of being empathetic from an engineering perspective. We had one of the guests earlier, Jifun Satapathy, who's the CISO of Medallia. He made a phenomenally great point about it. And what I'm hearing you about is that the idea of humility, right, that security needs to have almost inbuilt to make sure that you may not have answers to all the questions. You have to actually listen more than to talk more.
Oh, 100%. That's literally my job, is like always listening. And because we are always trying to like catch up. We're trying to like however mature your team is, you're still trying to like work with the rest of the function, and they're always at a phase just like faster than you, or you're at their pace too, but you're still like catching up to what's happening. Because in fact, security engineering jobs are much more harder than software engineering, in my opinion, because you also have to like learn how to use it and then secure it also. Whereas software engineering folks, most of the time, they just have to like learn how to use it and go and build with it. But that's
No, totally. And you made a point sort of earlier in the segment, and your point is that if you build this right, meaning if you do the security engineering right, then compliance is a byproduct. And I'm using compliance, you said GRC is a byproduct. Compliance and risk are byproducts. Is that a fair statement? Did I hear that right?
Yes. And maybe I'm oversimplifying it. There are aspects of it which GRC can still, like, that doesn't necessarily solve for the GRC aspect, but for the aspect of, are you making sure you're meeting all the requirements? Are you sticking to the standards? Are you following the best practices? That part is true. There's a lot of other parts of GRC, which is like, how do you communicate these risks? How do you build the process around it? How do you handle and track all these exceptions? All of that part, which is not necessarily 100% true in that statement. I'm not sure if I made sense. But
Got it. Yeah. And I'm going to look stupid for asking this question. I've spent an awful lot of time in GRC, Mukund, but there seems to be the looking down on GRC, typically from security and engineering, that I've not, in many cases that I've come across. Why is that? Why is GRC one level below security?
I think ignorance is my answer. I don't think it is necessarily one level below. I think they're completely different functions. And I think if you're trying to like correlate the two in any way, you just don't realize what the function serves for the business, in my opinion. I think a lot of that, I understand where you're coming from. I think a lot of that comes from purely like people misinterpreting it as like, oh, they don't have to code, they don't have to build tools, they don't really understand what's happening, they don't understand this Terraform, or they don't understand XYZ or whatever it is, and they're just like coming with policy documents and asking us, can you meet this? Whereas in reality, what's happening in the company or what's happening down in the tech stack is like way different from what people think. But I think that's also like a a thing where the security team or the product security function should like work with the governance, risk, and compliance team to say like, you know what, this doesn't make sense in our ecosystem for these reasons, but here are some compensating controls, and that is kind of how it is. But I think it's purely my answer is ignorance. I think it's that they don't
Got it.
realize what the difference is.
And do you
So,
also manage GRC? Have you managed GRC functions? Have you been part of GRC functions in current role, previous roles?
I don't manage the GRC function. We work very, very closely though.
Closely with
So,
GRC.
yeah.
And so my question, I think you said this something very profound, in my opinion. What do you, because you're almost talking about sort of engineering as a discipline, which there is application engineering, there is security engineering. And GRC is typically not considered engineering as a discipline. It is considered more policies and sort of documents and authoring and things like that. Did I hear that right?
I think that's kind of my experience. I don't think it's necessarily having to be true. I think there are a lot of GRC functions that use engineering as a tool to get better at what they're doing, including the team where I'm at currently. So I don't think it's necessarily true, but I also don't have an expectation that they are solid engineers and they go and build quality tools that everyone else can consume. I think everyone is building stuff nowadays to like make their lives easier, and that is fine. But like I said, I think the way I look at it and the way I always approach it, it's like it's a very good mirror for me. I might be really mad looking at it myself because I'm like, we don't meet those situations there, but that's a good thing. It's a good reflection on my other program, but that's kind of the way I look at it. It's like, yeah.
And I think what I'm hearing you say is that I think the idea of mirror, it's a very good analogy. And by that, you're basically saying that GRC is an independent observability function for some of the work that is happening in security and in engineering. And my question to you is that you are moving at 1,000 miles per hour. You're talking about thousands of releases. Right. And DevOps is a very common theme for you, especially in the world of Gen AI. I think the number of releases are just exploding, right? How can GRC not be an engineering function? Maybe I'll ask you slightly a different perspective. What is your take on that? I think my question to you is that should GRC be as much an engineering function as security is?
Not necessarily. I think what we should have is a bigger picture. What I'm about to say is it doesn't matter if there are thousands or millions or whatever deploys it, as long as they're repeatable, they're meeting the requirements, you're doing the things the right way. There's a way for you to make sure that whatever change you're introducing is verified for regression, not making sure it has bugs or whatever it is. Having that conversation with the engineering function and saying that we don't care whatever speed you're going at, however you're doing, as long as it's meeting these requirements, and we have a way to verify it, we have a way to audit it, we have a way to make sure it's what you expect it to be. Even if you don't have it necessarily today, what's your roadmap? What's your timeline on making sure that is the reality? Yes, if you don't have it today, that's a risk. And we'll talk about what the risk is, but then we also don't expect it to be solved 100% before you start using something. And sometimes it just makes sense for you to build those controls while you do it, because a lot of times, there are things that we get started on, we start building and then realize, that doesn't make sense. We have to change things out. And then there's a lot of adjusting the levers to make sure it's in the right path before you actually have it running. So a short answer, no. But if GRC wants to build controls to make sure that they can audit it in that way, then it needs to be an engineering function. But if they are able to work with their counterparts in security or engineering to say, you have to build me something so that I can go do this way, that's fine too. I don't think it's one way or the other.
So I think what you're basically saying is that the function has to exist, the engineering capital has to exist. Where it exists depends on which company you operate, on the context in which you operate in.
Yeah.
Got it. I think that last time we spoke, I think you alluded to this idea of practical controls, right? And what you made me think was that, okay, there is a gap between what controls are and what controls should be, like almost like the Kubernetes reconciliation mechanism. So, so what is your take on? I would love to sort of our listeners to hear more. I mean, maybe can you describe your view of practical controls, maybe one or two specific examples, so that we can tie this together?
Yeah, maybe I think what I was going to with that is like let's be more pragmatic in what you're asking for, right? If you were the engineer working on it and there was nothing that you could do to make sure that was addressed, whatever the requirement was or whatever the control that you're asking them to build is, either by tooling or by policy or whatever mechanism you're using, then what do you expect from them? Like, is that a residual risk that they accept? Like, what are we trying to communicate? How are we trying to communicate that? What is the conversation you're going to have with them? Is at that point, is that something that everyone even needs to know, or is it that leadership function needs to know and they work through it? There are always compensating controls, right? You can say, okay, we're going to create a training, we're going to create a best practices document. We hope that everyone will go read it. But again, there is a limitation to all of that. So I think what I was getting down to is what controls are you proposing for what situations? Are they pragmatic? Would you be able to do that if you were in their shoes? And is that timeline what you're expecting them to be reasonable? And also, have you communicated this to them? Like, more often than not, it's just like I've had several times where I've been like, you know what? We did this review. Here are the risks. I really don't know what to do here because I don't know how I would go solve for this either. But let's talk through it. Do you have ideas? Can you think of some ways that we can work on this together? And sometimes they come back with better ideas than we even thought of. Actually, most times they come up with better ideas than we even thought of. And then sometimes they're also like, actually, I don't know how to do this. There's no examples of it. I spoke to my friends in other companies. I spoke to other people doing this, and or it's coming up in 3 months from now because it's in their roadmap or whatever. And then at the point, it's just like, okay, you know what? Let's just that's a risk. You should know it. You know it now. Let's you are saying that you're aware of it and you're gonna acknowledge that and work on it. And then we're going to do that. So that is kind of what I meant by practical controls in many places. I think a lot of when this whole Gen AI started to boom with ChatGPT release and everything in there, a lot of teams were just like, we're not going to use it at all because we have no way of governing it, or we have no way of securing it. And even all the Gen AI security vendors or whatever tools that kept coming out, where there was a lag, there is between when the product is or technology is released to when it is actually when there is a governance function to it. So in that case, I don't think the practical control there is to say, don't use it because you are also hitting the learning curve part of the problems. I think then you have to say, okay, you can use it in these conditions and for these kind of situations. We may not have tools to validate it, but that's a policy control at that point. We are saying that if we see that you're misusing it or we see that you have been misbehaving, and then we're going to have a conversation or whatever. But at that point, you're still letting the business go and try things out in a in a safe manner, going and learning things and going and learning new technologies. That's one example. But yeah, then there are things like, yeah, I think that was one example. But yeah, let me know if you want anything else.
So I think what you're basically saying is that sometimes the outcomes are not very clear, and I think you made a very important point. If you put yourself in those engineers' shoes, would you do this? I think which is an important, which means that you're basically saying, does that add value to
Correct.
what outcome that I want to accomplish? And towards that, and my question is, you spoke you brilliantly about the paved path. To what extent are the GRC teams involved in the paved path? To what extent do they provide feedback in the paved path? Right? How much would you like them to do some of that?
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think there's an expectation that they are involved. I think my expectation is it's clear. If we were to do this and it were to resolve these issues, or it were to meet these criteria, and here's how you go audit it, does that meet your criteria from a compliance governance perspective? And if they say yes, then we'll build towards that and give them the necessary tools and visibility to go govern it themselves if they had to. If they said no, we need XYZ in addition to that, or we need to have a way to do this, then we'll like. So I think I would use them as a collaborator or as a stakeholder in building out the platform or the paid path in that case, over having them like contribute to it. That's kind of my approach.
Because let me give you a very tangible example, and I'll tell you where I'm coming. Let's say that, for example, for tech forward companies actually use this idea of immutable images, right? And you are basically at that point in time, what you've basically done is you have shifted the concept of systems into GitHub. That's what you have done, because all of these are declarative manifests that you're sort of managing and you're deploying through your Helm charts or whatever it is, right? And these are immutable images. So a traditional GRC person's view of patch management does not apply here, because there is nothing to patch, right? I mean, yes, there is, but it is operating at a different layer.
Yeah.
So, and that's where I was trying to tease out, right? So, if they understand that your paved path is to create an immutable image, your paved path is to create circuit breakers, right, so on and so forth, they may have a different view of how to manage these controls rather than ask sort of onerous questions.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think that is kind of where I was like going to say that the security function needs to work with the GRC function to say that that's not how we do things here. This is how we have approached it. Does this make sense for you? Does this meet our audit requirements? Does it meet our ability to like convey what we're trying to convey? Yeah, another really solid example, I think, was I was reading this somewhere. I don't know which company it was. I'm forgetting the name. It was It was a blog post on this, which is like they went down the route of how do we not have any other utilities in the image that we ship, to the point where they could not even do like forensics snapshot or anything in that sense. And when they actually had an incident, they were not able to like meet the requirements of that incident, because they built this in a way where they kind of shot themselves in the foot, where they can't even go back and like put on a thing that can take a snapshot of an image or whatever it is, because they went kind of like went all in on the extreme side of hardening, and it kind of had consequences from a.
That's a great point.
Yeah. So in that case, I would think them having a discussion with their thing to say, okay, we still have a way to do it.
No, that's a brilliant point, right? And you have to make sure some of those compliance especially on the type of applications, right? And
exactly.
Have to be met as well. So I want to ask you about the idea of shifting GRC left. If there can be a security harness, why is there no compliance harness in your CI/CD pipeline?
I don't know. I think maybe it's because a lot of times a lot of the laws and compliance comes way after a particular thing is released. Like even today, we don't have any like actual laws or requirements from a compliance perspective for anything Gen AI that I'm aware of, like at the state level or a federal level or any of that stuff. There could be aspects about verifying that it's not being used for causing harm from a bias perspective or a safety perspective, but those are like guidelines that most companies have, and not really a way to go audit and make sure that it is there. So in this case, we already are working towards like a shift or a paid path for building Gen AI applications in companies. But what is the Gen AI compliance aspect there? Like,
that's a great question.
It's not even defined.
Maybe
so how
I'll
do we
flip the question slightly differently. Let me move from compliance to risk.
Okay.
So why is there not a security risk harness?
I think there is. I don't think there is. It's not. I think what you're trying to say, even in your shift left, like forget every of this what I just said with Gen AI, anything. Even what you're trying to say with shift left is, okay, you are building code, right? You are writing something, you're committing something to GitHub, you're opening a draft pull request, you're running your security team is running a bunch of checks in the shift left world, right? What is that trying to say is it's calling out the risks for what the thing is there, right?
Exactly.
So there could be AppSec tools or security tools, but ultimately what they're trying to do is call out the various risks, and that is it is being introduced, right? Your I see part of things also similar, right? You could say that your requirement to say that you don't have anything that is a publicly facing EC2 instance. That could be your requirement for the
And
company.
IAC is infrastructure as code.
Yeah, sorry, my
Okay.
bad. Yeah. So, or you don't have a public infrastructure, or you don't have, the most stupid example is a S3 bucket example always. Like, you don't have a S3 bucket that is out there. But like, you could actually do that and call out the risk and have that conversation with the pay person there right at the shift left thing. So I think looking at it from a what are these security tools doing and what is the ultimate goal of that is like to call out and prevent those risks from existing in your ecosystem. So I think it is there. It's just how you portray it, how do you talk about
Got
it.
it.
That is important.
So to go back to your analogy, if I want to look at the mirror, what I'm saying is, can I keep looking at the mirror much more frequently, right? At the time of you releasing it, right?
Exactly.
And you're saying that exists or that should exist. And if
Yeah.
not, it has to be engineered into it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Got it.
Ultimately, when you're like, for example, it's saying someone don't do this because of this vulnerability. What you're trying to say is that if someone were to exploit this vulnerability, here's the risk. That's what people want to hear. They don't really want to know what your CVE number is. They don't really care about that. What they're trying to understand is what is the business risk of this not happening, or what's the technical risk of us not doing this, and how well are you communicating that? Like, you could throw in whatever CVE number, but does it make sense to them? Like, you have to talk to them about what the risk is. So
Got it. What is so a lot of this GRC has two functions, right? There are systems that are basically data that you collect from security tools, your paved path tooling, your applications, your SaaS applications, cloud, Kubernetes, all these different sorts. And then there is people. You are still touching in many cases those engineers, the security teams to provide some feedback, right? Whether it is your access control, do you have all the right people in your team have the right level of access, right, to avoid insider threats, or vulnerability management? You promise that you will close certain class of vulnerabilities within a time. Are you doing it? Are you remediating it? Things like this, which is the purpose of the GRC function. What is the effect of that as a toil on engineering teams, whether in security or in application engineering, product security or corporate security or application engineering? What is your take?
It's initially heavy, but it's on how well you collaborate with the team that's building the paved paths, or could help you build these controls into the different frameworks, and make sure that this is not a thing that you have to go talk about or even worry about. Like, I think when you first start up a program, or when you first start to working with people, there's a lot of those that will have to just like, even like when I first started the program, even like talking about like, make sure you don't you have someone that's doing 2 code reviews or 1 code review. Like, that was a conversation we had to have, because that whole function didn't necessarily exist. Now no one even thinks about that, talks about that, because we have gating functions that do it. We have things in that sense. So it's just like, it's part of the it's a scope, it's a security factor that is kind of already handled with. So it's kind of a maturity thing, I would say. So initially, yeah, definitely you don't have anything, you are working towards it, you're going to have that be a lot more, but it's on how well can you work with your security counterpart to make sure like all of this is like, you don't have to think about it. Why did you even make it a problem? Like, why don't you just go why don't you have preventive controls and not make it a problem?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So got it. So I think your argument is that I think the GRC team's job is to question these things, because as you were earlier saying, they are making sure that the promises are kept. The promises you make, the promises are kept. And in order to reduce the toil, I think they will have to work closely with the engineering, particularly the security teams. The closer they align with the paved path, the closer they design this as preventative controls and test of design controls, the better it is what I'm
100%. 100%.
Okay, got it. No, I think this is fantastic. I wanted to maybe, what do you see as a security engineering leader, Mukund, the role of Gen AI today in security?
It's a very loaded question. I think it's a very it's a very powerful productivity tool. It's kind of the way I'm using it. There's a lot of like, how do you keep focusing on doing the main thing? Keeping the main thing is kind of the way I look at it. It's like, I don't think you ask anyone, they want to like, they get a lot of joy saying, this morning I'm going to wake up and close 5 tickets on Jira or whatever it is. Like, that's not their goal. They're like, So using all the various Gen AI tools, like make sure that that kind of admin operational work is like handled, where for them to go back and continue to work on what the right thing is. Also, I feel like it has kind of enabled a lot more people to like just um, go and try things out for themselves for the first time, way more than previously. And this is true not just in the security side; it's also true in the engineering and product side. I think um, we have a lot of designers and product managers that are like using a lot of these tools to like prototype, understand what it is, get a sense of how it feels even before they have engineering functions come and build it out. So I feel like it's a really from a person who's consuming it is like really helpful. It's a very good productivity tool, but you should also like know the limitations of it, and you should also realize how, like, I think the more you use it, the more you'll realize how people can also abuse it because you're wearing your security hat often. So then you can also like go and work towards building controls towards it. So I feel like my thing is like I want most people to use it because it actually, even if you don't like it, even if you're a naysayer, even if you're skeptical about it, the reality is that everyone else is using it. And for us to be able to secure what everyone else is doing, we need to know how it's being used. So yeah, my take is that I think it's like any other technology can be used for bad also. But yeah, that's
Totally.
kind of
I think it's a mixed bag always.
Yeah.
But as a security professional, right, what do you what gives you sleepless nights in today, given every single technological shift that is happening? What makes you wake up at night? What makes you think that we should do a better job?
I think there's definitely like, are your controls working the way it should be working, even in this new realm of things? Is one of the biggest thing I would say. Like, do you have coverage? Are you able to like make sure that it's working the way it's supposed? For example, let's take a simple example. A lot of folks keep asking me, "Are you worried about the code that is generated by all these various good Gen AI tools and things in that sense?" I'm like, as long as it's still committed, as long as it's still going through the same pipeline, yeah, the velocity has increased. The volume might be more. The lines of code might be more. But you know what? We already have tooling to handle all of that, and we might end up with a lot bigger um, AWS bill because we are spending a lot more compute to validate all of this. But um, not really. I'm not worried about it. I think I think there are different classes of issues that we should be looking for that a traditional SaaS tool, for example, will not be looking for. So we'll have to like work on building those controls out, or detections out. But from the thing about like, are you worried about 100x code or are you worried about 1000x code? I'm not really worried about it. So that's a coverage part I was talking about. Is like, same thing with like, do you have visibility into how your applications get deployed? Like now that all these vibe coding tools exist, like what are people deploying that? Is it real member stuff? Is it just prototypes? Like what goes in there? So I think the coverage part is definitely one thing which I'm very always worried about, is like, how well are your controls working, and do you have visibility into when they're not? That's kind of the crux of it.
Got it. I think one of the challenges, and this is nothing new, right? This happens with every
exactly.
technology in flux, is that, for example, when open source was sort of front and center and has been there for a long time, couple of decades now, we had to deal with these transitive dependencies, right? You have libraries within libraries within libraries, and you can only control so much in terms of depth, right? I think the one question that I'm hearing as a constant argument, especially with vibe coding and generative AI developing code in many cases, is how much do people really understand code now?
How much did people really understand when they're copying it from Stack Overflow?
That is true.
Right? It's just like you've just made it easier to happen. I don't think it's the problem is new. I think the problem always existed. Like people were copying it from different Reddit or Stack Overflow or whatever they're getting from. They're trying things out. You hope your code review process is working well. You hope your senior engineers are catching that out. You hope that that stuff is being caught, or otherwise, you know what, it doesn't matter. You still have, it's not a single point of failure, is it? Like you might miss it at code review, you might find it at your pen test or your dynamic analysis, or you might find it from a bug bounty, or you might get back that later. It's just about how quickly are you able to identify that and how are you able to get to it. So I don't know. I don't necessarily
No,
think it's
I
like
actually let me say I love this because I was actually trying to push you as a security guy, and I was trying to see the pessimism, and I'm super glad to see a very optimistic security guy on this. So thank you very much. So I think this is
okay.
needed, my honest opinion. So thank you very much. Um, I want to ask you a slightly different question, which is you talked about GRC as a mirror,
Hmm.
right? Which is that it is an audit function, and as a result, as you audit, right, especially for inside the company operations, you're generating a ton of signals, right?
Yeah.
Does everybody have even simple things like should everybody be protected from an MFA perspective, which is a test of design control for all the
Yeah.
users, right? Do you have proper pull reviews to your point, so code reviews to your point, right, on the pull request, things like that? Why? What do you think as a security guy who's dealing with product security and app security? What do you think of consuming these signals that are generated by GRC as part of your security admission control process? Is this Does this data flow back into security at all? Is there any value in this data flowing back into security? When I say security, I'm talking about transactional security, right?
Yeah. Definitely a lot of value. I think the things like how do we make sure you have the MFA thing that you talked about, or how do you make sure like people's access controls are locked down and things in that sense, once we understand the problem more from a traditional security perspective, and we also understand that what this is, um, it is important for not just um, the risk and governance, risk and compliance perspective from an audit perspective. It also takes up time for us to go give back our evidence and audit and all of that stuff. So let's just fix this problem to say that the default method or the default way of doing it is always a feeder to compliant MFA. There's no exceptions to it, or we only have a small exception list, and that is treated by separately, and there is real-time audit logs and things in that sense for people to consume it. That way, that the scope of the work is like reduced drastically. So, I think it's a two-way thing. I think yes, we want that thing, but we also are trying to see how do we reduce the.
That's a great point. So I think what I'm hearing, I love what you're saying. I think I asked a different question. You're answering in a different way. You're basically saying, let's avoid as much as possible even generating the data in the first place, so that
Yeah.
they are incorporated as preventative controls. But in case we generate the data, let's bring them back. I think
Yeah.
that's the argument that you're making.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
beautiful. Got it. No, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. We are approaching the end of the segment, Mukund. This has been a fascinating discussion. So I want to give you the next 60 seconds, a minute or so, to shout out anybody who's helped you get where you are, right? Any colleagues, any friends, any mentors, books that you have read, podcasts that you listen to, anything that you want to do a shout out.
Oh man, it's going to take a whole 60 minutes on 60 seconds.
Okay.
I think it's going to be really hard. I think a lot of what um, people say, like, oh, they're self-made and all that kind of, is, in my opinion, BS. I don't think anyone is. It takes a whole village and a country to like actually help you get to where you are. There's so many people I won't like. If I start naming, I'm sure I'll miss someone, so I don't want to start naming. But I think it takes a lot, and not just people in industry, your own personal family, or everyone that is around you, because they're also like trying to like make it work for you for your career growth. So I just think it's I don't want to answer it with names because I'm sure I will miss someone, but everyone,
people.
like
Lot of
yeah,
people.
just a lot of people, and it's I don't think it's easy to like get to doing anything what you're doing without a lot of help from the community and from your family. So
Got it. For somebody who's trying to become join security, become the next Mukund, right? Become that security engineer at Credit Karma, become the CISO, right? The deputy CISO. What is your advice, right? And somebody who's coming out of college, fresh, what would your advice be? Where should they go start? How should they pick up?
Stay curious, learn a lot. You'll actually fail so many times, and that is also part of the learning. You may not understand it the first time you do it. There's a lot that goes into trying it yourself, that you learn more than just reading about it, talking to people about it. So I think a lot of people are hesitant to trying things out. Like, go spend some time, try it out. You will not succeed in your first few times. That's fine. You may succeed in to a degree in the next few times, and that is also fine. And then you will also realize how hard it is to build anything that is something to build. But I think a lot of people just like stop giving up to going and trying new things and being adaptive to what's happening. I think one thing I've always constantly heard people saying is like, I'm just like all the time context switching and learning new technologies and doing things in that sense. And I'm like, that's unfortunately the reality of security. And you gotta like meet where your people are. And if your people are going and doing all those things, yes, you gotta like go and learn all those aspects and work with and learn how to secure it. For example, I've gotten a lot of people telling me like, oh, a data engineer only needs to learn the data engineering stack, or a full stack engineer needs to only learn how to build a front end app, a back end, and talk to various APIs. We need to learn all of it together. And I'm like, yeah, you have to learn all of it together because you're responsible for like giving them that recommendations or talk to them and do the review. So it's hard. It's also not expected that you 100% know everything. You can always like talk to people. Those people are willing to teach you. You don't have to like go back to like reading the books and learning everything 100% of the time. Most of the time, I just join most of the things and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, what does that do? And like, try to map. As long as you have strong fundamentals, you can like map it back to how you're thinking, back to the first principles part of things. So just focus on the fundamentals, be curious, learn a lot is kind of what I would say.
Love it. I think that's great advice. With that, Mukund, it was fascinating having you on the show. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Security and GRC Decoded. We are your go-to resource for staying ahead in governance, risk, and compliance. If today's episode resonated with you, we would love for you to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. To dive deeper into these topics, visit us at compliancecow.com and follow us on LinkedIn for more insights and community conversations. Join us next time as we continue decoding the future of GRC.